welcome back to
Mommy's house.
another emergency pod. Michael, what is going on out there?
It feels like it's falling apart.
You had a nightmare.
I had a nightmare
About
Patrick Bet-David.
Whoa, I'm coming for you. Listen, Drew. I'm going to come in. I'm going to shave your beard while you sleep. We're going to come after Patrick Bet-David a little bit. I'm a fan of this guy. I've liked his show, and I could talk more about it, but what was the nightmare?
I don't know. I remember waking up like he was chasing me through a hotel of some sort.
I'm an Assyrian coming for you in the temple.
Yeah, they've come for us before. They're coming back, baby.
So weird and bizarre what's going on. And look, here's the issue. And I know we have slightly differing opinions on this, as was evident last week in the way we were analyzing the flagrant Schultz response to what was going on with Candace and Ben. Here's something I want to say on the outset. I don't like the idea, fundamentally, of questioning people's intentions or making a claim that I know what's going on in somebody's heart and what they're feeling and making accusations about them when they don't claim to be feeling that way themselves. Mm-hmm. So, 1 second. For example.
Thanks, Andrew.
For example, like this charge of anti-Semitism, which I have seen a lot of examples of when it gets thrown around so loosely, and I think to the Jewish community's detriment. I don't think it's a good strategy, and I don't think it's effective, and I think it's counterproductive to just call everything anti-Semitic so easily and tell somebody that they are something as a label, as a charge, when they themselves say that's not what they are. So that applies in terms of, Candace Owens and in terms of other people where you're throwing out the charge of it and they themselves are saying, no, I'm not. And you are saying, yes, you are, as a label, like as an identity, as a feeling, and as a sentiment. That to me isn't right, because if they're telling you, like, they, more than anyone else, know what they feel about something. It reminds me, it's reminiscent of when in the BLM woke heyday, they were calling everybody racist, whether they knew it or not. You're racist whether you know it or not. And you said something about anti-Semitism last time. I'll finish, about that you can have it and not know it. I just find it to be... that stirs for me, that rings false. There is a difference, though, in that in the woke BLM day, that charge of racism, whether you know it or not, was linked to whiteness. It wasn't linked to words and deeds. In other words, when leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement or Ibram X. Kendi or the D'Angelo, whoever wrote White Fragility, they were saying you're racist by the product of your whiteness. The reason you're racist is because you're white, not because of the things you say or do. That's different in the case of anti-Semitism. Now, sometimes it's obviously misapplied and mislabeled to anybody who's just asking questions about history, the Jewish community, criticizing Israel. But when it comes to words and deeds, now we can separate what one maybe personally feels about a group versus things that they say that embolden anti-Semitic ideas, perpetuate them, engage in tropes. See, I told you I get to a place where you might agree more. Mm-hmm. In other words, it's possible not to feel animosity towards Jews, but then engage in certain behavior inadvertently or advertently, that's very questionable, and that raises suspicion about Jews and sows suspicion and contributes to a rhetoric that a lot of proud anti-Semites relish in and certainly perpetuates tropes and stereotypes. I think in Candace Owens's case, when she was talking about suspicion about Jewish gangs and this instinct to say, what's really going on here? This instinct to default to conspiratorial thinking and have Jews generally caught in the mix. Not all Jews, but some. It's very imprecise. And Ben Shapiro said, you either don't know enough to care or don't care enough to know. And that brings us to what's going on here with Patrick Bet-David, Candace Owens, and Tucker Fucker Carlson. Excuse my language. I'm going to say it for him because I don't know what's going on there. But there's a lot of things to cover. Yeah. And the latest, we'll start with PBD because that's the freshest thing that's going on. He said in his show yesterday or today, what did he say?
Yeah, so he clipped, the same way we clipped Schultz for our own discussion. Mm-hmm. He clipped Andrew Schultz talking about the Daily Wire as an Israeli news agency. Mm-hmm. It seemed like Andrew was a little bit annoyed about it because in his next episode he kind of called it out under the radar.
I wonder if he saw our clip. Andrew, if we move the needle for you, you're welcome. Maybe.
Yeah, right. So since our last clip, Andrew backtracked a little bit and was like, yeah, maybe there's some stuff I don't know about this.
And remember you said, I think he was animated by this hostility, maybe the potential not that he's anti-Semitic, but they were so excited to talk about the Daily Wire and Jews and Israel in this disparaging way.
Yeah.
And I said to you on the phone, I'm like, I don't think it's about Israel and the Jews. I think it's a personal thing that he just isn't into Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
And he admitted it in the first 2 seconds of the episode. He's like, it's not like I've ever criticized Ben Shapiro.
Right.
I think it's more like...
There's probably more of that going on than I cared.
If Ben Shapiro was the annoying kid in sleepaway camp
Yeah.
and was the victim of bullying, Andrew Schultz was his victimizer.
Right. And then at the end, he said, yo, we love you, Ben.
We love you, Ben. I ain't picking on you, man.
Yo,
It's like a
Ben.
classic scenario. He's like, here's Ben in one bunk, in one bunk bed, and Andrew's in the other's like, oh, Benny's here, and he's just
Like, yo, Ben, what's your screen name? I'm going to add you to my buddy list. Come on, bro. Give me your screen name.
relentless. Now, I find that unfortunate, but for whatever reason, he's not into him as a persona or personality in this space, and that seemed to be what was really animating him. Like, got you, hypocrite.
Yeah.
You know?
One last thing about that before we go on to PBD. I heard someone say, I forgot who it is. But less. There's the animation part that I mentioned, but in addition to that, there's this rush to defend an anti-Semitic idea, where they heard, or whatever, not an anti-Semitic idea, but like they heard someone criticize Israel and got fired for it, and then before they did all the research about maybe I don't have all the facts here. They got really excited and exuberant and enthusiastic about like rushing to defend that position, which I think might be a better way to articulate what I was talking about.
But I will simply say it wasn't the idea that they got excited about. It was that someone got fired for saying any idea at a place that branded itself as the uncancelable, anti-cancel culture, and he got thirsty and excited to call Ben a hypocrite because he's been on this brand of we don't cancel people for different ideas.
Fair enough.
Which brings us to PBD.
Yeah. So he clipped the Andrew thing to have a discussion about how the Daily Wire is an Israeli news agency.
Yeah.
And then he had a follow-up clip about where he called it the Daily Jewish Wire.
Did he say Daily Jewish Wire?
Yeah. And in his explanation, it was the same way there's the Christian Broadcasting Network, where they don't pretend to be pan-religious, like we're just the religious. We are the Christian Broadcasting Network. He was saying the Daily Wire should just be honest and say, we're the Jewish Daily Wire. We care about Israel and Judaism more than America and conservatism, and that's just what we believe.
Or that we care about that first and foremost. And then other stuff we care about, but what takes precedent, what takes priority. Not precedent. What takes priority is being Jewish, being pro-Israel, and that was his claim. Now I'm gonna talk about PBD as PBD,
okay?
Because he's pissing. I want to talk about PBD for a second. Let's talk about this guy. Michael, you're gonna play Adam Sosnick or whoever, one of the other guys on the podcast.
The guy who was on mislabeled.
No,
how did I get here? Literally, guy, how did you get me here?
No, that was crazy by Adam that you did that. That you did that random podcast. But it's okay. We love those guys. Listen, they're a Jewish podcast and they're proud of it. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong. But I want to talk about these for a second. You know, you got Ben Shapiro. You know, you got Candace Owens, and then he always names a lot of different like high roller names. You got Elon Musk. You got Bill Gates. You know, you got the president. You got George Bush. You got H. Walker Bush, who's dead now, but he was significant. You know, you got
Believe
a lot of
very significant.
You got Steve Jobs, also no longer with us, but the technology he's given us is obviously world changing. Great entrepreneur. You got Jeff Bezos. You got his wife, and then you got the Illuminati. So I want to talk about this guy for a second because what was weird. Anyway, enough of that. Let me tell you something about parenting quickly before we go on. Okay, you want to know how it works in the Patrick Bet-David household? Okay, when my kids, when they go to sleep, I wake them up in the middle of the night. If they don't read 30 pages, when my kids go to sleep in the middle of the night, if they don't read 30 pages, I wake them up. If they don't read 30 pages, they don't get to go back to sleep. That's how it's done. That's how you build resilience in kids.
This guy is like the classic example to me of someone who is successful in one area, and then at the dinner table, his opinion on everything matters. You're like, here's why LeBron James is the best basketball player ever.
And they're
because
like,
I sold an insurance
Dad,
company.
I know you bought the house, but you don't want to be a media
No, but then everyone else really wants to know.
No, let me tell you how it's done. Let me tell you this. I don't want to talk about Elon Musk for a second. I want to talk about Elon Musk's first wife, second wife, third wife. He's been married a couple of times. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Israel. Here's what bothers me. And I steamrolled that for a second, but here's what bothers me. They are like kind of overlooking, and maybe this is to Daily Wire's fault for in the way strategically this was all handled. And we could talk about that too. They're not looking at the full picture as to maybe what had happened between Candace and the Daily Wire and why they butted heads and why there may have been other things internally that were going on. They are quickly jumping and painting this picture that all she did was be critical of Israeli policy and then talked about Christian values, and that was an issue with a, quote, Jewish company. It's just not what happened, and you can't attribute her firing to simply being a proud Christian woman who was critical of certain Israeli policy. They are ignoring a lot of patterns of problematic things that were done, whether it was fumbling on Kanye, trying to contextualize Kanye's unapologetic, very clear anti-Semitic remarks. That was sort of the first thing where they kind of clashed. And then whether it was about, when it came to Israel, being a little bit reckless and careless with statements, and maybe she wasn't, and from my conversation with her, it was clear she wasn't aware that those were so provocative, but they were in a time when Israel was attacked, and then this charge of dual loyalty in discussions with Tucker Carlson over Ben. Maybe Candace didn't make those charges directly, but Tucker certainly did and doubled down on it. And then this whole beef with Rabbi Shmuley, who I criticized like crazy, but there was a lot of problematic statements. Yeah.
Plus, outside of Israel, she was covering really strongly the P. Diddy case.
Right.
And what was going on, and what's going on with pharmaceutical companies. And in the P. Diddy case, she was also asking questions. The people around him just happened to be Jews.
Right.
And she was asking all these questions about why are there so many Jews around P. Diddy and Michael Jackson.
She
and
said that Macron's wife had a dick. You know.
Yeah, and also like very conspiratorial theories around what's happening in the pharmaceutical companies with like the COVID vaccine and all that.
Right.
So it wasn't just about Israel.
It wasn't even.
It was about Jews specifically.
It wasn't. It was just. I mean, there was a lot of things that clearly, temperamentally, stylistically, there's all of these factors, and for them to present like, clearly the Daily Wire is just all about Jewishness and just you want to be a Jew, you can work here, you're safe. But if you're not a Jew, you're not. Makes me very suspicious of the intentions here, in that this is more of a power play to attract talent to valuetainment. And that's almost a little bit worse than just being, that's worse than I don't think he feels in his heart any hostility towards Jews, but to use this idea to create a wedge between the free-thinking Christian community and a Jewish media company, as he deems it, a Jewish media company, when you got so many people there who aren't Jewish. The CEO isn't Jewish. Jeremy Boring is not Jewish. Matt Walsh, Matt Walsh. He made that what as a woman? He's not Jewish. He's just playing a Dutch. Andrew Klavan, he talks like this. Andrew Klavan was a Jew, no longer a Jew. He was Jewish born, but now he accepts Jesus as his Lord and Savior.
Is that right?
Andrew Klavan, yes. Michael knows clearly, because Michael knows clearly. Very conservative, very Christian. Clearly, I'm doing the whole Daily Wire roster here. But it's like, what are we talking about here? Like, it's disingenuous to say that as a way to try to drive a wedge, to say Daily Wire, it doesn't represent all of conservative ideals and principles, inclusive of Christian conservatives, Jewish conservatives, Muslim conservatives, everybody. Its focus is for Jews, by Jews, that kind of thing. And that's not kosher. That seems yucky.
Yeah, it's yucky, and to me it's a little bit scary because it portends.
What was that word?
Portends? Portends. It predicts.
I like that.
But in like an occultish way.
I thought you were mispronouncing pretends, like a French guy. It portends. Yeah.
Do not pretend with me.
It says.
No, that what it's implying is that there's an appetite for anti-Jewish conversation,
suspicion of Jews
for a broad audience, and the smart content creators realize what broad audiences want and give it to them.
Yeah.
And I think he's doing it in a smart way, because you can't say I'm an anti-Semite. You can't say Ben has dual loyalties. What you can say is it should be called, the Daily Jewish Wire. What you can't say is their first priority is Israel. It's a sophisticated way to say the same types of things that you hear on the far right.
Now
that are not out of the window of polite conversation.
Now, to be clear, because I see it coming in, and I see the comments coming in saying, "Oh, so once again, here we go. Two Jews doubling down, and now Patrick, but David is an anti-Semite, so it loses credibility." But you're not saying that. You're saying that to feed and attract constituents who would like those ideas.
Yes,
he's playing into that.
Yes, and here's like something that maybe I don't explain clearly enough that I kind of believe.
You never do. You never do. It's my boomer. You never do, Mike. You never do. Yeah. Tell me.
Like thinking without bringing up Nazi Germany, thinking back to Nazi Germany, like anti-Semitism doesn't spread because the poor, dumb people like it. Mm-hmm. It spreads because these sophisticated, elite, educated people like it and can get behind it. And in order to do that, you have to give them sophisticated, educated, elite reasons and conversation like ways of speaking about it that speak to their morality and their sophistication and their education.
Well, I guess it can come from both. It can come from the slums and the ivory tower.
It comes from, and where they meet in the middle is there. And so you have people on the far. We had a comment yesterday that said someone just wrote, "I am an anti-Semite" on our thing. Yeah. Like, cool. So there's those people who have no problem saying it, but there's a lot of people in the middle who would never say I'm an anti-Semite. But what they might say is all the classic anti-Semitic tropes just in a sophisticated way, which is what I feel like PBD is doing. Whether or not he believes it, once that's in the conversation and it becomes mainstream, that's what the conversation is. Right. And like from there, like I'm reading this book, Dead People Love Dead Jews Now by Dara Horn. It's like really messed me up. It's really scary. But like in every city in Europe forever, every Jew was either expelled or murdered. Like it happens, and like we're not different than people in the 30s and 40s.
We're not immune to that.
Yeah. Americans are not different than Germans in Berlin in the 1930s. We're all just human, and like this stuff happens. If you have any sense of history, this stuff happens. And like once the ball gets rolling on anti-Semitism, I don't know how you stop it. And so like it's a little bit disturbing to me.
Another point of clarification. Is that basically there was this in a conversation that Candace had with Rabbi Barclay, she was trying to say, so what is anti-Semitism? And he, I think, misspoke and said that it mutates and that it changes with time. And I think the more refined answer to that, as a correction that I felt was necessary to put out there, is anti-Semitism is always the same, in that it's a hatred, a hostility, a suspicion of Jews. But the reasons for anti-Semitism, the causes of it, mutate with time. So that's what a lot of people have talked about, whether it's theological, early days Christian anti-Semitism that was rooted in Jews, accusing Jews of killing Jesus. There's the other forms of theological anti-Semitism in the Islamic world, that Jews didn't accept Muhammad and didn't accept that, and therefore we're seen as... I'm not a scholar of it, but that's rooted in theology. There's economic anti-Semitism, resentment of Jews, resentment of Jewish success, resentment and accusing Jews of being the capitalists and the exploiters and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the left-wing and political anti-Semitism. And the right-wing, far-right anti-Semitism is also part of the economic resentment. And then there's sort of the social anti-Semitism. So it stems from all these different places.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
What Rabbi Jonathan Sachs explained is not only does it mutate, but it follows the most sophisticated thinking of the day. So when it was theological anti-Semitism, it followed like Christian belief that like, no, we're not bad people. We're doing this because we love God. That's why we have to get the Jews out. Yeah. And then
they're satanic. They're demonic.
And then it shifts into science, where like I'm not anti-Semitic. I just believe in race and race
purification.
And purification. Like I would never hurt a good person, but
for
like
humanity, we have to purify.
Right. And then we saw where that leads with the Holocaust, like the worst thing that can lead to. And now it follows like social justice and like our moral outrage.
And anti-Israel.
I'm not anti-Semitic. I believe in human rights.
Right.
I'm against genocide.
Right. I'm against Jews having a state. I'm against Jews having self-protection,
and if you take a step back and you look at what's happening, you can see a bit of a pattern. Right. If you don't take a step back, then you're in the algorithm and you're like, of course I hate genocide.
Right.
And so like we're privileged to have that bird's eye view like because of our education. And so that's where we're coming from with this.
Yeah. And I find it problematic to use those old canards and tropes and suspicions willingly or unwillingly, or inadvertently or advertently, for like the gain of trying to attract talent or attract a fan base, to say, brand-wise, we're different. I mean, we're all in this media space, this new media space, but just know Daily Wire puts Jew and Israel first and foremost. And I think it's important to remember that Daily Wire support for Israel, granted Ben is an Orthodox Jew unapologetically and deserves sympathy for what's happened post-October 7th from me and from, decent people around the world. Like, it's so amazing to be on defense after something like this has happened from the get-go. But the reason to support Israel. The reason Daily Wire takes a pro-Israel position is in the same way that Sam Harris just spoke about on a recent episode, why he supports Israel. And it is not because of a Jewish tribal allegiance. What's the word? Not quote, but summarize sort of the idea of what Sam Harris said in a recent podcast that I saw clipped around today, is that...
Do you do a Sam Harris?
Well, the thing is, Hamas are worse than the Nazis. Because what Hamas did, they did with elation. No, I don't do it.
It's a little more like nasal.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a clip going around. Oh, I have done it. I've tried. It's like this, the face. The face is like... Well, yeah.
I don't think I know it well enough.
Just the face. We can zoom in.
He has one eye closed.
It's sort of like half. He's like, well, he's always waking up. Welcome back to the Waking Up Podcast. My guest today is
I literally just woke up.
Asaf Al-Husseini, who's going to speak about. The point is he was making was like, generally speaking, he compared Hamas to the Nazis, and Hamas are actually worse because they have a religious fervor animating their barbarism. Yes. And Nazis had to hide it to try to say we're above that. And they tried to keep it behind the scenes. But his point was, my support for Israel is rooted not in a tribal allegiance to Jews or to Israel. I don't, even though technically I'm Jewish, I never really identify as a Jew, and I'm not religious. I'm an atheist. And I don't have blind support for Israel or the Jewish community.
He loves Hashem.
My support for them is in my support for civilization, in my support for what is good and secular and rooted in a defense of human rights and civil liberties and liberal values and principles. Yeah. And it is those same set of principles is what the Daily Wire support of Israel is rooted in. It's not rooted in a tribal allegiance to, well, we have to support Judaism and Jewish community first because it's a Jewish company. Yeah. And it's astounding to me that that's somehow controversial to stand with Israel and be pro-Israel against terrorism, against barbarism and savagery, that an act that was committed against Israel. Why would that wouldn't unite all decent people at Daily Wire, PBD, everywhere? That's the shocking thing about people who make the case for Israel, that you can't quite see the moral differences that are so right in front of you, and that people attribute support for Israel to some sort of dual loyalty, tribal allegiance, putting your personal values or personal connections first before American values.
So that's what I mean. They're like I don't hate Ben Shapiro because he's a Jew. I hate Ben Shapiro because I believe in media and the sanctity of the free press, and I don't think our news should be split between like a foreign country and our country.
Correct.
That's what I believe in.
And to put support for Israel as exclusive or at odds with free speech,
it's classic stuff.
Is crazy to me. It's like the idea is, guess what country in the Middle East supports free speech? Guess what country in the Middle East has free press? Israel. Support for Israel is not exclusive to free speech. It's part and parcel with it. And I think we can move on to the second half of this.
Wait, I want to throw one thing out just while we're on topic of like media.
Do it.
Like also another place I'm coming from is like the successful media personalities are the ones who are first in line to say the thing that no one else either thinks to or has the balls to say out loud. A little bit like comedy. Like the more brutally honest you can be, like the more successful your voice is as a comic. So like Louis C.K. will be like, I hate my 2-year-old. She's a bitch. Yeah. And like that was so funny. Everyone's like, oh, I've never heard. Of course we think that, but I've never seen anyone say
so
that.
Michael, where are you going this?
So like the Daily Wire, and I don't know if correct me if I'm wrong, but they were sort of the first ones in mainstream conversation to be like, trans rights is bullshit. I'm not calling a man a woman. Don't ever tell me to do that. I don't believe in it. Right. Forget it.
What is a woman?
And they rode that.
What is a woman? Yeah.
They rode that. And so like I think maybe the next frontier is to be like, Israel's bullshit. Let's be honest. There's a Jewish problem here, and that's what I think is happening. And people like
think that's the next
Patrick
unspoken.
David, are going to ride that, and it seems like it's working. It seems like because we're talking about them.
What? We're talking about PBD.
Talking about Patrick David.
So that feels like the edgy free speech frontier.
That's what I think.
Interesting. That's an interesting take, and I think that's true in that people perceive it that way, that this is the next woke thing you can't talk about.
Yes.
Israel and Jews. But what a trap that lays for Jews, because to say anti-Semitic stuff and get called out for it, and then be accused that, oh, that's woke cancel culture, trying to cancel me out, means when we see anti-Semitism, we can't call it out lest we be accused of being cancel-y woke people. That's ridiculous. I think the difference between cancel culture versus calling out anti-Semitism or the massive double standards about Israel, just because things seem alike does not mean they are alike. A lot of the stuff that was claimed in cancel culture about a racist country we live in, all the systemic racism and stuff like that, I'll say, you might not agree, a lot of that was contrasted by data and statistics. Totally. And therefore, in the face of reality, that stuff was seen to be nonsensical. But in the case of anti-Semitism and hate crimes against Jews and hostility towards Israel and all this double standard talk, it's affirmed by statistics. So when you square it against reality, it's actually quite true that there's rising anti-Semitism, and it's actually quite true that Israel is held to a massive double standard on the world stage, in the UN. These are affirmed by reality. So to me, it forces you to become a little more refined in your definition of cancel culture, which to me spoke to the idea of when people are joking, when people are making casual comments, when people are simply exchanging in reasonable conversation and ideas, there was this culture not to want to hear anything or to take jokes out of context or to mischaracterize and misrepresent people. That's very different than saying Jews control the media and control Hollywood and should be destroyed. It doesn't mean nothing is objectionable. And there's a huge confusion around that.
Are we doing that with saying, I guess we're not saying Patrick McDavid shouldn't be able to say this
Of
or
course
shouldn't have
not.
a show. I guess we're
criticizing
engaging with what he's saying.
Correct. And I do think now shifting a little bit, we're still good?
Just getting anxious about that.
I'm hearing that thing outside. What is that? A truck?
It's a truck.
Oh.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I do think there is a mistake being made slightly in that perhaps, you know, the chickens are coming home to roost a little bit on sort of the left of center ADL approach to calling everything under the sun anti-Semitic and riding that wave of woke BLM culture that called everything racist and all white people racist and everybody anti-Semitic. And then people are sort of falling for that same sort of presentation when we actually do see real anti-Semitism. So it's like a crying wolf scenario. Yeah. And I don't take responsibility for that, but I think there is something to be said about a lot of people on the left of center who jumped to conclusions and called Whoopi Goldberg and Richard Spencer the same thing. That's what Rabbi Whoopi said. It loses all its meaning.
I'm going to add to that something I heard on Dan Senior's podcast. He's the guy who co-wrote Startup Nation, an amazing podcast called Call Me Back. He was going as far as to say, as all of Holocaust education has failed. What have we been doing for the last 50 years where nobody understands what anti-Semitism is? Anti-Semitism isn't when you kill a Jew. Like I'm saying, like that might be the result of anti-Semitism, but like nobody understands that like when a society has issues and they project all those issues onto the Jewish people instead of dealing with those issues themselves, that is kind of what anti-Semitism is. But like all we learn about are like Jews die. Every city needs to have a museum about how many Jews died there. They have to have.
But it's
old
damned if you do,
synagogues.
damned if you don't. We would have said this. What if we did it a different way? Said, where are the museums commemorating this? Where's the messaging? Where's the films about all the stuff and suffering that happened to make people aware of what could happen so it doesn't happen again? Feels like damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Maybe, but either way, it doesn't seem like it's gotten us anywhere.
Or maybe it's just going to happen anyway, and we just have to treadmill in place.
Maybe. But on to Tucker.
One little thing to throw in here that I think, and it ties into Tucker. I had the sandwich for lunch today. No. And it ties into Tucker. And I think it's crazy because my man, Dr. Jordan Peterson, is a prophet.
TJP.
He predicted all of this. Do you understand? I've been following for years. That's why I'm so well bloody versed. He said that if you continue in the heyday of woke cancel culture, in the heyday of identity politics, when it was really on the ascendant in the left. And he kept asking, when does the left go too far? We know when the right goes too far. When does the left go too far? He was asking that question. He's like, what's going to happen? He was saying this 5 years ago, whatever.
Please.
What he was saying, we don't know when the left can go too far. And you know what's going to happen? If you keep focusing on identity politics, group identity being paramount, and this utterly ridiculous intersectionality, you're going to see a rise on the white identitarian right. You're going to see it, man, and it's going to be ugly, man. You won't like that. Because if you keep saying whites are whites and they're worse, and they don't get to speak and they don't get to have a voice, white males, they're going to bite back and they're going to say, okay, yep, I'll play. Because if you're establishing hierarchies based on race and group identity being paramount, your tribal group is what matters most, they're going to play the game. And when they play, it's going to be ugly. And now we're seeing woke, white, right-wing, identitarian politics come about, where now it's sexy and edgy to be proud to be white. And now it's sexy and edgy to have that tinge of anti-Semitism.
Where's it sexy and edgy?
You're just seeing, if you're on Twitter, in the dark parts of Twitter.
Yeah, I'm not.
I am.
So educate me. I don't know.
Oh my God. It's just like that comment. I am anti-Semitic. I'm gonna say it now.
It was a black guy.
Who cares? I think Kanye's remarks actually played into a lot of, dare I say, white identitarian sentiment. Jews controlling Hollywood and media and the news, and AIPAC controlling foreign policy. When I say white identitarian, I actually think various racial groups can buy into that. But it stems from those original ideas of Jewish power.
Call it nationalism,
and Jewish
maybe?
inferiority and Jewish supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Like those accusations are resonant with various groups. So I guess when he said white identitarian, it was sort of like if you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, you're going to see this backlash. And I think it's tying in now to this sort of Tucker, trying to drive a wedge between Christians and Jews and Christians and Israel. And let's use Tucker as an example. What is going on here that is motivating him to select one guy to do a hit piece on the way Christians are treated in Israel?
Well, you can't ignore the fact that he left Fox News. He's launching his own media company independently, and he needs to find a lane and sensation, and he has to find the thing he's going to say that no one else is going to say.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It has
it's edgy.
to be. Yeah,
it's sexy now.
Yeah.
Anti-Semitism is just truth. That's edgy. Like a lot of the a lot of the vicious anti-Semites I'm coming across on Twitter. First of all, they will say things that are anti-Semitic, and then they'll defend themselves against the charge of anti-Semitism by being more anti-Semitic. They'll say like, anti-Semitic. Look at these Jews trying to control my speech, just like they control the banks, just like they control Hollywood. Calling me anti-Semitic. How ridiculous, you see? So they will minimize the Holocaust and want another one. It's really kind of nuts. They minimize that it happened and wish it kind of did. It's a very strange thing, and I think that edginess, that's sort of like, this is the naughty speech that's true. Anti-Semitism and truth are just synonymous now. The Jews are just going to call anything anti-Semitic. Now, we should take note. Don't call everything anti-Semitic, but it doesn't give cover and excuse for those who actually are. What calling everything anti-Semitic does is provide that cover. And this is what Jordan Peterson said years ago is going to happen. Now, this ascendant, counter, pendulum swinging white identitarian, proud to be sort of white and anti-Jewish, and to call out the Jews in control, this conspiratorial group of Jews that I'm going to talk about. There's like literal blood libel pictures being posted. Did anybody know that this happened in the 1500s? Did anybody know that this was? I'm not saying it's true. I don't know, but I'm just asking questions, and I'm getting pushback for it.
Right,
there was a lot of cases of it.
Yeah. What's JP saying now? He's part of the Daily Wire, right?
Yes.
What's he saying now?
I'm waiting for it.
He hasn't said anything?
I don't know.
Does he have like a daily show or anything?
He's got interviews with all sorts of different people, but I have to see what he might say about this. He's definitely spoken about the Jewish community and Jews and stuff like that in his growing up, like having an affinity for Jews because of the intellectual pursuits that he was in, that he often found himself very much working alongside. And the forward, one of the guys who wrote the forward of his book is like a scholar of the Holocaust, and like he's had a lot of close relations with Jews over the years. I don't know what he's saying specifically about this, in like calling back to his predictions. But that's what I'm seeing now. It manifests in real time. As far as Tucker, what is it? Is it pure business?
What did he do? I just saw the thumbnail. Yeah.
I have to watch the entire episode, but I'm seeing all these clips of it, and it opens with him talking about how in all these conflicts, the real victims are Christians. Christians are the ones to suffer here.
Always.
And then he talks about how in the West Bank, he basically analyzes how Christians are treated and interviews a guy who I don't even think lives in the West Bank, but is a Christian priest, Palestinian Christian priest, talking about how difficult it is in Israel and how they're treated as second-class citizens. Meanwhile, from my understanding, like the population of Christians in the West Bank since Palestinian Authority took over has dwindled from like 80% to 12%. And, ISIS was destroying churches and all this kind of stuff. And maybe he talked about that too. So I don't want to misrepresent the whole conversation, but it's clear there's a big provocation happening and a wedge that is so baffling to me.
Aren't Christians being massacred in like Nigeria, or like there are worse off Christians?
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. And so now there's this backlash. A lot of
right?
Armenians and churches and people are speaking out. It's just a strange thing. Post a war that was started by an enemy of Israel attacking Israel, and now we're starting to see this pile on. Let's examine Israel from the opposition side, from the pressure side, when Israel was attacked. So crazy.
Did you see the Rogan clip with that British fella? No, the Coleman Hughes thing.
Excellent. Shouts to Coleman, man. I'm trying to get him
yeah,
on the show. So he's my hero.
He reminds me of you in his very balanced approach and just addressing the facts. He just kills it. He killed it last week.
I've seen him for years. Yeah. See, all these people are discovering Douglas Murray and Coleman Hughes. I've known these guys forever.
You know what was wild to me? You saw the clip on The View, right?
Yeah. Wasn't that amazing?
The most crazy thing about the View clip was the crowd.
They didn't know what to do.
The crowd was clapping at everything Coleman was saying, which is the opposite of everything they clapped at 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's
sheep. It's Bill Maher's crowd too. Bill Maher. I mean, there's a similar thing about like, okay. They also, I mean, the way Coleman is what's the brilliance of Coleman is not just what he says, but how he presents.
I didn't see it as sheep. I see it as what was
the tide is turning?
mainstream thought, was conventional thought 2 years ago. The tides have turned, and most people agree with Coleman.
But also, Coleman is talking about these issues, and he's black, so when he can talk about his experience, I mean, like they can't boo him. for criticizing,
but they don't need
criticizing because he's speaking about it like when Thomas Sowell or all these people speak out against it. It allows them to say anything without people being suspicious about their intentions, and they can call out these sort of racialized politics that he says like color. Like he spoke about it so articulately and so calmly. Like you just because of who he is, because he happens to be black, it's like, what are you going to do? Boo what he just said? Not only is he talking from a personal experience, from an intellectual, the points are so solid and so salient. Yeah. And you can't just say, oh, well, you wouldn't understand because such and such, you're a white man. Like you can't use that. So that's out the window. And therefore, what are you going to do? You got to clap. It's the best arguments ever.
I would have thought there'd be silence and like weirdness.
But they were clapping.
They were clapping, and then the host of The View were kind of pushing back.
She's just making crap up. You're co-opted by the right.
Do you think she read it twice? You think she said, I read your book twice because I really wanted to get your arguments?
No.
That was if that's true, it's very impressive.
Yeah, but it was just one of these like, you're reaching. She's just reaching now. Because he's being so salient that she feels like I have to push back on this guy somehow. Let me see what I could do.
So then he went on Rogan, and Rogan put out the clip, which I think is cool because like it was a pretty.
I appreciate your perspective.
Interesting conversation. I mean, Rogan seems to be struggling with it.
Well, that's why you don't pile on Rogan when he has Kurt Metzger on and he's watching. He goes, seems like a genocide. I don't know. That's crazy. Yeah. Then he has Coleman on, who gives the best explanation of how to perceive this, in my opinion, that anyone's ever given. And he's not Jewish and connected and biased in that way. He's trying to look at it objectively. Yeah. That's why it's so powerful when he says it versus if he had an advocate on in the traditional sense, or a pro-Israel or Jewish lobby advocate person. When Coleman is saying it, I think it's poignant and resonant. And to Joe, he's not questioning his motives or anything. He's like listening to it and you're like, He's like, the death rate for civilians to combatants is lower than Americans in Mosul getting ISIS out. And just the whole thing. And then Joe Rogan listens, and that's it. He just takes it in. And therefore, like, Joe Rogan's not the problem. He's just reflecting how things are being perceived in an honest way.
Yeah, totally.
Same with Schultz and all those people, too, with regards to, like, the local domestic drama.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I mean, Rogan, I think, makes some very heartfelt points, which is, like, there has to be a better way. And then I don't think any of his guests have really quite explained the difference between, like, Mexicans attacking America and Hamas attacking Israel. Like I'm still not sure anyone's explains it properly. Yeah. But it's
well, the real question is, but what if there wasn't, Joe, a better way?
Right. Which I don't think anyone said.
No one. But what if there wasn't? Hypothetically, would you then accept that the people you're witnessing being bombed are potentially Hamas dressed in civilian clothes, taking a stroller and filling it with bombs? Or on any of that kind of stuff, would you? What if I told you those people walking that's Osama bin Laden and a few of his friends? Would that change for you? And if hypothetically the answer is yes, then the answer is yes. Yeah. So like,
the British guy made like I think a sound moral argument, but it wasn't.
Who was the British
convincing? Guy? He was on I don't remember his name. He wrote a book and he was on trigonometry.
I definitely have seen it.
The clip went out last night, and Rogan I thought was very heartfelt, and he gave Yaron's argument basically, which is this is Hamas's fault, and you have to. It's hard to take moral sides because that's not very fashionable right now. But we have to make a real moral judgment here.
British guy, you don't remember his name?
And Joe was like polite. He was like, I hear it. You know what? Should I find it?
Yeah. Just look at it, and I'll keep talking. This podcast is brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. Just kidding, but I did eat that.
Brandon O'Neill.
Oh.
America runs on Duncan.
See, he is a free speech advocate kind of guy wearing a hat. Is he wearing a hat in the episode?
Should I read the thing? Yeah, he's wearing a hat.
Yeah, I just saw a clip. I didn't see it about Israel. But
yeah, no. So it's really I've been following which clips Joe Rogan releases because I think it's very telling because he doesn't release a lot of clips, one every few episodes.
Yeah, interesting.
And the ones he's released on Israel have all been, I think, fair, with the exception of the Kurt Metzger one.
Yeah.
But you can see when I talk about like the spectrum, you can see even Joe Rogan now is sliding of like. I'm losing patience. I can't defend this forever.
About Israel's actions?
Yeah, you see.
Well, look,
him,
I think
you
at
see
the
it
end of the
happening.
day, a lot of this situation boils down to people refusing to accept that evil exists and refusing to accept that wars of defense are necessary and that they come at a cost. That's tragic. But if you're dealing with enemies of peace who don't seek peace, you have to fight them. And some people are willing to accept that and therefore justify defending yourself even if it comes at terrible cost and tragedy. And they don't want to look at who's at fault or who's accountable. They just don't like that it exists. They don't like that destruction exists. That's kind of understandable from an empathetic. That's what Coleman was saying, and I totally get why people don't see it my way because you just see this and it's horrible. But it's sort of like, I don't know if this is going to be a good argument, but like when you see a natural disaster that just happens, we mourn and we grieve. And in that sense, like they look at it as if it's like that, in a sense that I just see the results of something and I don't have time to look at moral accountability. I don't have time to attribute who's right and wrong. I just don't want that to exist.
Yeah.
I don't want death and destruction to exist. Right. That is an idealism that I think is dangerous because in the end, the only thing it enables by trying to not have strong moral stances are the bad guys. They enable the people who perpetuated the evil to keep bringing it on.
What it portends, it's also implying is if everything went back to the way it was on October 6th, I'd be okay with that for Joe Rogan because he would be okay with it. What does he care?
What do you mean?
Like he's saying, just stop it, and let's just go. Let's just stop now, and let's just go back to the way things were on October 6th at least, and then I could just pay attention to something else.
Right.
I don't think what any guest has explained was like it wasn't okay on October 6th, and it's not okay if you have kids and are living in Israel, or if you just live in Israel.
And the concept of justice there of people who have been slaughtered, and there are people who are being held hostage. And
the hostage part too,
and they're still there. October 6th, none of those hostages were dead, and they were all back home. So justice also demands retribution. You have to go after the people that did it and make sure it doesn't happen again. That's the responsibility of the government. And I made a video today about how comfortable everyone is in their armchairs in the West to go, no. I guarantee you, if in Austin, buses were getting blown up and there was rocket fire on the comedy mothership, or in New York City, if rockets were raining down and people were rushing their kids in kindergarten into bomb shelters daily, weekly, people might have a slightly different perspective on shame on Israel, or a shame on checkpoints or a security wall, because they don't deal with the consequences of those judgments.
Yeah. And they do deal with migrants, and they're pretty pro-wall down there, aren't they?
I just mean, like, it's always easy to judge policies that don't affect you.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
On Tucker, I don't have much to say other than what the hell is going on.
Yeah. But I think we know what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't think it's such a mystery.
Hate or it's business?
I think it's business.
Oh, okay.
I think it's business.
Nice.
I do.
He was just on Kill Tony. Did you see that?
I saw that. I didn't watch it, but I saw he was.
But now
on
I feel icky about him. Just in that, like.
I was saying, did you like him before? Did you think he was some
Tucker.
kind of? Did you?
No, not necessarily because of the laugh. It's
He's
just
always been icky, hasn't
It's
he?
just a little. Well, he says things. He just constantly is contradicting himself. I mean, I love Israel. I love the Israeli people. I don't really care for them, but I love them. I mean, this war, I certainly don't want to get involved. I don't want to see anything bad happen. I feel terrible for what's happened in Israel. I certainly do, but I don't care for them. That laugh always. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. It's very weird.
I mean, from my perspective, he's been incredibly successful because when he got fired from Fox News, you weren't sure what he was going to do. And now all you're hearing is Tucker, Ben Shapiro, Tucker, Ben Shapiro, Tucker, Candace, which means the most powerful voices in media are Tucker, Ben, and Candace. Like, he's put himself in that conversation.
What people are saying is they're going
Good for
after
him.
Why are they more angry about Ben Shapiro's caring about his people and his community more than conservative or America? Why did people get more upset about that than Tucker's dishonesty and betrayal of somebody who's been a colleague and a friend of his over the years in the conservative media space, for Tucker to then claim, you must not love America. And to, as Yaron said last week, like, Ben Shapiro has done so much for the spread of conservative ideas, perpetuating and bringing out conservative ideas and defending American values and principles, for Tucker to then suggest that he doesn't love America because he supports an ally of America and one that he has a personal connection to as well, is so dishonest and in a way, like, I don't know, treacherous, whatever you call it, disingenuous and nasty. Why aren't people more upset about that? What kind of conservative principle is that, to say, like, you, for opportunistic reasons, betrayed the principle of, talk about loyalty, betrayed this principle of honesty, the principle of being genuine, of integrity? Think about that, Chaka.
If you know how the Impractical Jokers has like a cruise, and like Skankfest does like a cruise. If the Daily Wire did a cruise, would you go on the Daily Wire cruise?
With Bible study,
with your family?
Bible study and lecture
They had
series.
a minion, they had everything. I bet you would be pretty popular.
Would it be fun?
Fun. I don't know. It depends.
If there's probably a shooting range, some skeet shooting.
Off the boat.
They probably hunt fish. I'm going down with Andrew Clavin for a scuba diving dip to get some seafood. I don't know. Sure.
What would the music be?
Proud to be an American and an Israeli. And listen, let me talk. It would probably sail all the way to Israel. Let's be honest. Anyway, that's the emergency pod wrap up. Pleasure talking to you, Michael. Shooting the breeze here.
Yeah.
On Ami's House, which is a proudly Jewish and pro-American and pro-human podcast.
And quick reminder: if you made it this far, we do have a Patreon. We'd love your support. We can do more things like this.
Yeah.
So check it out.
And we can say what we really believe. Join us at the Value Entertainment Ami's House Patreon. Thanks so much for listening, and stay tuned for more from Ami's House.